Welcome to Resisting Beta, the men's health podcast. And now, your host, Andrew Bontz. Mine, Joel Haasenritter. And we're going to answer some questions about what does having a life of design mean? And what is the impact of that? I mean, it sounds very esoteric, you know, is it like broad, high level, like kind of almost unreachable. So I'm excited to kind of get into that topic. And there's another topic that we've heard a lot over the last probably 20 years or so is what does life balance really mean? And how do the 7 keys that Joel talks about come into play to balance that out or give it some more well-roundedness? Because it almost has gotten a little out of hand, in my opinion, in a lot of professional settings, you know.
Agreed. Yeah.
And what are the main things that block men from achieving fulfillment? So a little bit about Joel. He was a small business owner. He ran a thriving business in the piano service business for 20 years. And him and his wife and his family decided to prioritize health. And they moved across the country to seek a better way of life, which I think is just amazing. And now he's a certified Oola Life coach at Wayfinders For Life. What he does is he helps visionary, heart-centered people create a life that matters by helping them reconnect with their dreams and crush their goals so they can leave a lasting impact in the world. That sounds fantastic, Joel. Thank you so much for being here, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate your show very much. I think your mission is on point. It's very much needed, and I'm honored to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, man, we've had a brief phone conversation, got introduced from one of the previous guests on the podcast, so I am so happy that you're here. Now, I teased that story a little bit. I think we need to hear a little bit more about that transformation and what you're going through after, being a business owner for 20 years and then picking up and moving across the country. Tell us a little bit about what that was like.
Yeah, well, we actually had no intention of moving. We had an established life in Georgia. My wife was born and raised there. Both of our families were there. We migrated, quote unquote, from Hawaii, which is where I was born, and then wound up in Georgia. So I lived most of my life in Georgia and, started working in the piano industry when I was a teenager. So that kind of led me in that direction. I did some training, with different manufacturers and really was established in that industry and with that business. But over the course of the 10 years prior to us moving, her health just began to decline. And she went from high type A personality in law firms, in the medical industry, working for the chief pediatric cardiologist at one point, to bedridden in 10 years. And so the 2 to 3 years prior to us moving, I was a full-time caretaker, full-time business owner, full-time dad, full-time husband, full-time, wearing all the hats and not necessarily doing any of them particularly well, but doing my best to hold it all together. And, at one point we looked at each other and said, if the last 10 years is an indication of what the next 10 years holds, we need to do something different. We had expired all of the traditional, non-traditional medicine approaches that we were aware of at that time. And the medical industry there and her doctors basically said, well, we're going to manage your symptoms, we're going to manage your pain, but sorry, that's about all we can do. Oh. And we just weren't satisfied enough with that answer. Maybe that was ignorance, I don't know, but time would prove otherwise. And so we said, we've got to do something different. And I think, in this big conversation and high level conversation about life improvement, there is some point where you get to that place and say, I'm not okay with where I'm at. This doesn't work for me. I don't know what to do, perhaps. I don't know what the next step is, but I know the next step is not the step that I've been doing that's driving me insane and driving my life down into the dirt. And that's what we did. We got to a healthy level of disgust and said, let's do something different. And so I started researching the different environments. The Georgia environment was not good for her. And so I started researching different environments, and we have 2 older kids that had moved out to Phoenix and a couple of years prior to that. And so when she would come out here to visit, we noticed that she felt better. And Phoenix happened to be in the top 10 list of most stable environments in the U.S. And so we decided to make a leap. And it was one of the most difficult things we've ever done, and one of the most rewarding things we've also ever done. But it was, that transition, you're talking about the transition, it was rough. And in a lot of ways, we're still in a transition. 4.5 years later, right? Still putting the pieces together. But I thought I was going to be moving into a different industry. The job that I had fell through a week before we moved out.
Oh, wow.
And the people that were going to buy our home, their financing fell through 2 weeks before we were going to move out. So we went, we had this grand plan of how this was all going to work. And in a matter of a couple of weeks, that all fell apart. But again, when you get to that place where what you're doing is not working, you can't go back to that place. And you also can't unsee that that's not okay. And so we decided to take a step. And it's, like I said, it's one of the best things we've done.
What was that like for you as you were evolving and kind of changing how you identified yourself? Like that change in identity from what you've done for 20 years to the new adventure. I mean, what was that like inside?
Yeah, it was rough. That's what it was like inside. Because, on my resume, I could go to manufacturers, I could go to sales reps, I could go to service, leaders in my industry. And I knew people and was known by people. It's what I did, and, at high levels. And so when you're kind of siloed in one direction for most of your life, you've got to figure out how to reinvent yourself in a lot of ways. So I actually went and studied other things that I'm interested in. I'm interested in some of the IT departments and avenues. And so I studied lean management, if you will, but kind of helping development teams become high-performing teams and working together better, more efficiently. So I got certifications in that. I got my project management PMP certification. I love working with different projects and always have my hands in a million different things. So I decided to go down that road, and that's what the job that fell through was in. It was kind of overseeing 2 different development teams with a company that was working in autonomous vehicles, and I was like giddy excited, like this is so cool. And then you get the pink slip email that says we decided to go a different way, and when all indications were, it's we don't have your contract, but we're getting your contract together. Without those words, it was, in my mind, it was done. And perhaps that was naivety. I don't know. But so the process of that was stepping back and really getting introspective, getting clear on what my strengths were and my weaknesses were when it comes to different industries, looking at starting a new business here in Arizona in the piano industry, but I knew like 3 people here, and it's a client-heavy business. And so that takes time to do. So yeah, there's aptitude tests, there's things like that you can do online. There's different resources that you can look at, but it really comes down to what do I have capacity for? And, what am I capable of? What do I want to do? And just like in personal development, how am I going to get there? Because your first step is not going to be your last step, or perhaps the step that you want to take. Your first step might just suck. And so that's just the reality of it. And so, I put my head down and put my working cap on and said, okay, let's figure out something different.
I mean, I applaud the courage it took to take that step, because the more I've learned, after my divorce and getting in the dating world, is being a good ender. And I read that in a book, and I've learned that it applies to a hell of a lot more than just romantic relationships. It applies to if a relationship no longer serves you, no matter what it is, a relationship with a career, a friend, then you have to find a way around it. or through it, or just make a choice, because living in that moment of suffering is also a choice, right?
True.
And once you become aware that there's a different solution out there, even though that it's going to suck.
Right.
So good for you, man, in taking that leap. So if someone's in that suck right now, or in just, maybe it's not complete suck, maybe it's just kind of like, okay. Like, what advice would you give them to deal with that, walking into kind of like the fog of suck, right?
Yeah. That's a good question. We've all been there. And, we go through different seasons in life. Mm-hmm. I kind of divide it up into 4 different seasons, just kind of how my brain thinks. And the first is it's that suck. That suck can be an extreme. It can be trauma. It can be tragedy. It can be all of those things, as is the focus of your podcast, right? Mm-hmm. And we have that season of suck, and we have to make it through that. There are survival mechanisms, there are coping mechanisms, right? All of these things. And the next season is like balance and growth. You go through that season of suck, that season of tragedy, and in the middle, in between those two things, is healing, right? Yep. And then you go through the season of balance and growth. And then at some level, I don't think a lot of people get to this level. I'm still working on it myself, but you get to this place of optimizing. And it's where the pieces that are weak, you've kind of strengthened those. The pieces that are strong, you've poured fuel on the fire. And you get to this place where, okay, this is my set of routines. These are the things I'm disciplined at. These are the things I am aware in my own mental health is a problem. How do I fix it? You get to that place of optimizing.
Right.
And then only when you get to those three stages, through those 3 stages, can you really be effective at giving back and leaving your legacy.
Interesting.
It's really difficult to do that unless you've gone through those seasons. And, we go through those seasons in multiple phases. Sometimes there's overlap, and sometimes it's in different areas of our life, right? Mm-hmm. In that season, my career was on the line, and that season of suck just, it applied to our family life and our time, the quality of our time together. And then also, what am I going to do? Am I going to be pushing carts? And, so I would say the first thing is to get really self-aware. It's really, really difficult to know how to take one more step or what direction that step should even take unless you really know where you're at. And just be honest with yourself. I think a lot of times we shy away from being honest with ourselves. And until you get really, really self-aware, and it's okay to say this sucks. It's okay to say, I can't stand where I'm at. It's okay to say, man, these things suck. You just can't live there.
Right.
Right. And so be honest with yourself. And then I would say the next thing, even before you know the next step to take, is to reconnect with your dreams. I think it's so cliche in our industry, in personal development, dream big, set all your goals, don't set goals, and all these books related around it and all the psychology behind it. And it's all legit, right? It's all legit. But I don't think you can be effective in life unless you've connected your heart to your head. And what I mean by that is your dreams, your aspirations, giving yourself the freedom to sit in that state for a moment. Because one of the things that I hear all the time is just a simple question, man, what's the dream for your life? And the answer, I don't know.
Right.
That's a tragedy, right? Mm-hmm. That's a tragedy in society. And I've been there, right? Mm-hmm. But when you start connecting that part of your existence, that part of your heart and your life, to then the tangible, which is your brain, that's your steps, that's your goals, that's the tangible things like, okay, this is what I'd love to have in my life or who I want to be in my life. And let's start mapping out, let's start reverse engineering. What's the next step? Maybe it's not the end step first, but what's the next step? And if you can take one step, you can take another step, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that you just covered a lot there. So thank you for that. That was awesome. It made me think of when I was married. I was married for over 11 years. And, you kind of get okay with where you're at, and you justify not changing, right? Because you're scared of what being honest with yourself means. And in particular, what are the consequences of being honest? And I think that a lot of people, if they can't deal with the consequences of that honesty, they numb it.
1,000%.
Delay it and procrastinate it. And maybe it'll get better when. And that moment where you're saying that it will get better when in the future is a dangerous game, man. So dangerous to where you're giving your life force away for when. And it's like almost where hope can be dangerous, in my opinion. So you use the word balance. So like getting out of the season of suck, which, that's not a fun place to be. But
it's not.
it's probably where a lot of men are at least one phase of your life. Most likely, there's something. I don't know where it is. Maybe it's finance. Maybe it's weight. Maybe it's in your relationship. But as you go towards the balance, like what does life balance mean to you, and how does it differentiate from like work-life balance that HR people talk about?
Yeah, right. It's such a important question, I think, especially in personal development, because the reality is perfect balance is a myth. There's never going to be a time, or maybe it's not a myth, maybe it's just rare, that there's ever a time in our life where like everything is working well. The problem and the fallacy is we ignore the things that aren't working well, and we lie to ourselves that our life is okay when things are out of balance. And so a good friend of mine, he's part of my inner circle. He's a fellow Oola Life coach, Rick Schwartz. He had a perfect analogy of this, I think. And that is, it's almost like surfing. Balance is not where there's no waves. Balance is where everything that you're doing is moving to keep you on the surfboard. Right? Your muscles are moving back and forth. Your hands are in the air, right? You're shifting your weight back and forth. It's being aware that something's not right and I'm going to fall off the surfboard. I need to do something about it. And so balance is less, to me, a state of being as it is a journey and a process. And so in Oola and the coaching that I do, we divide that up into 7 key areas, and that's fitness, finance, family, field, which is your career, faith, friends, and fun. And there's a million different ways to divide up life, right? I'm not going to argue that, but for most people, something in their life is going to fall under one of these categories. And so maybe your career is rocking, maybe you got money in the bank, but you're not putting time and intention to your relationship, or you're not putting time and intention to your health. That may not be a problem today, but if you don't recognize it today, in 2, 3, 4 years from now, it's going to be a financial crisis. It's going to put a strain on your relationship, and your health might not be recoverable. So the point is to be aware and to be intentional in all these 7 key areas, not so that everything is going to be 1,000% perfect. Maybe it's just that you don't fall off the surfboard. And at some point, you might catch that perfect wave in your life where everything is working well, things are rolling, you have momentum behind all the things that you're trying to do, your relationships are strong, you have a strong group of friends around you, which I think is critical for this topic, and you're exercising regularly, you're eating well, right? All of these things are dialed in. That's the optimized phase. That's where you've got it down enough to where you're balanced on that surfboard, and if a wave comes, it's not going to knock you off. First time you try surfing, you're not even going to get up, right? You're going to get up on one knee maybe, and in the little kiddie pool ocean, and you're going to get knocked off, right? It's because you don't know how to balance what you're trying to do. So the fallacy is to say life balance, it's impossible, it's a myth, and ignore the part of your lives that are out of balance. point is look at it. The point is be aware. The point is keep working at it. The point is strengthen the muscles that are weak so that you don't get knocked off the surfboard of life.
Yeah, I think it's easy for us to, I think about my marriage, and I had been very, very intentional about being an amazing father. I sacrificed whatever I could or would to be there for my girls. And I justified it because I was like, I'm a great dad. The whole world can see that I'm a great dad. And it doesn't matter whatever else, if I'm neglecting my health or neglecting my business or neglecting my wife at the time, I'm a great dad. And that's important, but it's really easy to kind of like tell yourself those narratives and to complain about everything else that isn't going right and sit in that victim mindset, right? But it keeps coming back to like, it took me figuring out, just starting being honest with myself. I was like, there's something wrong here. And, it's going from unaware to aware at that point in time. And once you're aware, then it takes courage to take action, right? So, where do you see most men, our audience in particular, that, our mission is attached to improving mental health. Like when people are in that suck phase, right? And they're out of balance. I think looking at the next season in life, you can't see the forest through the trees. Agreed. So if a man listening to this, or maybe they have a friend or family member that is in that season number 1 that you talked about, how can we guide that man, whether it be ourselves or somebody else, to see the next step? Because you can't think about legacy if you're in that season 1, right?
1,000%. Yeah, 1,000%. So going back to, going back to something you just said about the excuses that we make. We see that a lot of times, especially with men with their career. Maybe I don't spend enough time at home, but I'm a great provider. Like, are you? Because money is not equal to your provisions. Part of it, for sure, you got to take care of your family. But are you providing for your role in your family? And I think when you find yourself at a place of making excuses, that should be a trigger. Because if you didn't have to justify it, you wouldn't be making excuses. And as soon as you have to justify it, there's something out of balance. There's something you're choosing not to look at. So in that moment, again, going back to recognition, is like, what are the things that are blocking me? Some of the common ones that we talk about: fear, huge one, right? Fear, guilt. That's another big one. That can be of something that I did. It can be of something done to me, right? Anger for guys. That's a big one. We let ourselves get to the place of this explosive emotion that's uncontrollable. It's okay to be frustrated. That happens. Don't live there, right? When you get angry, that's when it affects your relationships. That's when it affects your friendships. That's when it affects your kids and your spouse, right? Self-sabotage, another big one. Self-sabotage is like, it's just a chain that literally just holds you back. Like, it's just a set of chains that the voices, you're starting to believe those voices in your head that say you're not enough, you'll never measure up. And maybe it was something that was spoken to you when you were a kid, right? Could have been your father that says you're a piece of crap. Could be a teacher that says you're stupid, right? And we begin to believe those things. Laziness is another one. It's a lot easier to binge watch Netflix than get out and do a couple laps around the subdivision, even if it's something as simple as that. Envy is another one that's huge, especially for men. It's like, wow, check out dude's car over there. Check out his house. He's got everything put together. Jealousy is one thing that's natural. Again, don't live there. But where it turns super dark is when you don't want them to have what it is you want. That's a totally different place to be, right? And then focus is a huge one. And that as a mental blocker is a lack of focus or a misguided focus. It could be a hyper focus in, alcohol, drug addiction, pornography, all of these things. Could be a hobby, could be gaming, it could be fantasy football, where it's a hyper focus in one area at the expense of the things that you should be focused on. So I think one of the first questions to ask yourself is really, where am I sitting right now? Am I sitting in a place of fear? And if so, why? We're only born with 2 innate fears. That's the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. That's it. Everything else is learned, right? Everything else is a process of our environment, and not making light of it, right? That's all legit, right? But fear is literally a belief in something that has yet to materialize, right? Different from danger. Danger is real. If you're in a dangerous situation, get out, call for help, right? But fear of the unknown, fear of not being successful. I had a guy, we were doing this about a year ago. We were doing a personal development thing at a friend of mine's house. And one of the gentlemen there said, yeah, fear is a big deal for me. I said, well, what is it about fear? He said, it's a fear of being successful. I was like, whoa, why does that scare you? And it was, well, because I don't know how people are going to look at me. I don't know what they're going to think if I come rolling up in my successful image, whatever that is for him, right? My successful career, and you're kind of leaving your friends behind. And that kind of transitions into get a better set of friends. Like your inner circle, the people that you allow, that you're vulnerable with, upgrade your level of friends. They say we're the sum of the 5 people we're around the most, right? And so just look at that group. And if that group is holding you back, or if there's someone that as soon as you take a step to get out of the funk that you're in, they pull you back in to justify their own misery, like there's a time to cancel and delete that friendship, right? It's just, you've got to do what you have to do for your life. And by the way, if you look at your set of friends and everybody's fantastic, there's usually one in the group that is the one holding you back. That might just be you. So look at that as well. If you look at your friends like, wow, everybody's fantastic, maybe look in the mirror a little bit and see how you can support them better. But ask yourself, where do I stand in these areas?
Holy crap, man. You just talked so much things. It gave me a lot of different stories and things that really related to me. So the one about self-sabotage is really impactful to me.
Yeah.
Because I think that's like, I tend to explain to other people something I'm working through and constantly work through is, that thing that's called a governor on a golf cart?
Yeah.
I feel like I have a governor on, like, from a financial mindset on where I want to grow, right? And where I want to go. And there's a book that I've been reading. It's called The Warrior Book. And he talks about how men kind of go through this cycle where they build, and they get to a certain point and they start consciously or subconsciously breaking shit in their life, like to bring them back down so they can start building again. And it creates this like vicious cycle of the 4 seasons intentionally.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
To like, oh, okay, I figured this out, but I like the challenge. I like the chase. I'm going to start breaking shit in my life so I can kind of do it all over again. And because I like the challenge. So as I tell that story, what does that trigger in you on seeing some men go through those struggles and through those scenarios? And what advice do you typically give in that scenario?
Yeah, man, that's a powerful question right there. And I think we've all been there in different places. The self-sabotage part can be a minor thing that you do, or it could be a major thing that you do. It could be just, having an extra drink when you shouldn't, that type of a thing. But it could be just listening too much to those voices in your head. There's a place and time where you have to ask yourself, is it true? So self-sabotage, you're listening to the things that you're never going to be enough. And so because I believe that, I'm going to break stuff so that I can make an excuse as to why I'm not enough. So is it true? And if it's true, how do you know? What's your evidence? Like, just taking it down to a next level, drilling down to some of these questions can help start to shift that focus. So is it true? How do I know it's true? What's my evidence? Is it helpful? Is another one I love to ask. So you'll never amount to nothing. Is it true? Maybe I believe it. How do you know? Well, because I haven't yet. Well, that's a statement of your past. You can't connect a statement of your past and predict the future, right? So, and then even if you do believe those two things, is it helpful? Well, no, it's not. So how can we shift the question to something different, right? And so, so many times it is about that focus. And sometimes you have to, as a local pastor here that put this beautifully, and I'm paraphrasing here, but sometimes you can't think your way into a different way of doing. You have to do your way into a different way of thinking. And so you can change your environment, you can change your habits, you can change your routines. Those are choices that you can make. And at some point, you begin to see things differently. At some point, you say, I had a little win there, which means I can get another little win. I'm a huge proponent of little wins. Little wins over time is massive progress. And I think sometimes we have this pie in the sky and then say, I can't reach that pie in the sky. Well, one, you don't know that. Two, it's not true. And three, it's not helpful. So let's reframe that. Maybe you can't hit the stars, but could you get to the moon? Maybe you can't get to the moon. Can you get out of your house? Can you get off the couch? Can you go tie your shoes? Just put on your shoes. Can you get your workout equipment, your workout clothes set aside, ready to go at night, so that in the morning you don't say to yourself, I got to get all that stuff out, get all my clothes. I don't even know where my shorts are, right? It's little wins along the way that make massive progress over time. And so ask yourself those three questions, refocus your perspective, and your brain will start to believe it. Your brain starts to believe it, you get momentum.
Man, that hits different. I would pause this episode, go back 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and listen to that again, because Joel just dropped a lot of just value there that spoke to me, especially as I was going through the divorce and figuring my way through it. Because I remember that I was always blaming her for not being further enough financially. It was or further along in my business. It's because I wasn't enough for her. I wasn't enough. I wasn't the man she wanted me to become to allow for happiness in the relationship. And then I got out of the marriage, and that feeling of not being enough is still there. And I found that it's truly the foundation of confidence, or fake confidence, if as you're battling that inner struggle, depending on the positive, negative part of that pendulum, right?
Yeah.
To where having that confidence of like, I am enough. And you're not going to get there overnight. And it took those little moments that you mentioned there to build that. And in these little wins, for me, it was just getting up before the sunrise for 100 days in a row. That's what it was.
That.
I got up
That's
before
awesome.
sunrise and journaled. And some days I went back to bed.
Yeah.
But I got up and I journaled. And then there were a handful of days where I had too much bourbon the night before. And I was like,
Sure.
I got to do it. And then I'd go back to bed. But I did it. And that was the simple win. I had some days I had this whole success ritual where it was 6 or 7 things where I'd journal and meditate and I'd work out and I'd do some affirmations and I'd do some meditation and some breathing. But I wouldn't do that all the time. And the days I didn't do it, I'd beat the crap out of myself mentally, saying that you're a failure, you failed again, nice work, like, oh, you're this, you're that kind of stuff. And that really spoke to me, man. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because
Thank you.
it's really difficult to hear a big number like 7 and hear the things that we've talked about so far, all of these 7 things in your life, and you can get stuck focusing on the one that is the lowest if you were to rank them all, or you can get stuck justifying the one in the highest, right? So like that's really the balance component, and navigating and also giving yourself the grace that it's never going to be perfect.
Yeah.
And that's the fun of it.
That's huge.
The process. It's the process of the balance that leads to fulfillment and being okay and grateful and being present in that process. That is, in my opinion, the definition of a fulfilled life. Because happiness is like a warm bath. It's going to come and go. But
and by the way,
go ahead.
Those two things, that your lowest and your weakest, you can marry together to improve. So just as a quick example, quick aside, is if, let's say, your fitness is hurting, but your friendships are strong, then go to the gym with your friends.
Sure.
Right? Let's so you can marry those different areas to bolster a weak area by using a strong area so that it doesn't suck as much.
I like that.
Yeah.
So what are some other pairings you've seen in the strong and the weak, is for the men that you coach?
Yeah. So a lot of it like goes to the same key areas, and all of those 7 different areas, and marrying those together. You can do the same with your relationships. Your relationships and your friendships. Maybe you and your spouse are struggling, but you can find a really healthy couple to be more a part of, to go out on group dates, right? To do an activity, that kind of a thing, just to be around a different environment, a different positivity that you wouldn't have alone, until you can kind of build that into your relationship. One thing, sorry, another squirrel moment, but one thing that I love, the co-founder of Oola, Dave Braun, he said one time at a conference specific to relationships, he said, if you're not working on your marriage, you're working on your divorce. And I think that's a huge key, because sometimes as guys, we check out. We just like, it's not that bad. It's not going to get much worse. Maybe it won't get any better, but it's okay to kind of live in this stagnant mode. It's not. You're either going in one direction or the other. And that's certainly been true in my relationship. If I don't put emphasis on that, you're either working on your marriage or your divorce. What's it going to be? And that's a choice that we have to make every day, right? So if you can get around a different group of friends to help just be a more positive environment, then do that, right? If you get into this, I know we're dealing in the suck phase, but just kind of like in that optimize phase, you could have a mentor in each of the 7 areas. You could have a financial mentor. You could have a family, coach, if you will. You could have a business coach. You could have a fitness coach. Like you could have a mentor or a strong friend. That's what they do. Like we all know those guys that are like, they're speaking some financial language I'm not even sure how to spell 401k, and they're like off in this, neverland of decimals and so forth. Like I don't know that stuff, but I know a guy that knows all that stuff, so maybe I should hang out with him more, right? So a lot of it is changing your environment. And that can be in this suck phase of tragedy and in healing where it's like, I don't know what to do. One of the first things I told my son when he was in school and he was getting bullied is change your environment, get out of that situation. Maybe you can't meet head on with the bully. Maybe you're not prepared with tools to do that well and effectively and safely and all of those things. Change your environment. Go around your teacher. Hang around them. The bully's not going to come around. They're not going to, be pushing you down on the playground if you're close proximity to your teacher, right? So just changing your environment can change so much about how we see things. Get up on a mountain and look at the sunset. Look at the sunrise, right? And it's kind of off topic from the question that you were going for, but again, squirrel moment. But so much of how we see things is the environment that we're in. And if you can't change how you're seeing things, change your environment.
I like that because that's really one of the only things that we have control over is one of our choices and like what environment is keeping you where you're at, and just being aware of that fact, right? Understanding that once you become aware of it, if you stay there, it's on you, right?
Definitely.
And nobody else's fault but your own, right? If you want to wallow in your own self-pity and like the attention that you get from the suffering that you're in, okay. How's that working for you? Right?
Yeah, doing a 90-day look back sometimes is helpful. Just like what's going on in the past 90 days. That 3-month thing you can also take back to a 3-day thing. If I feel crappy today, it's usually a result of the past 72 hours of choices that I made, environment that I've been, nutrition that I've put in my mouth or not, right? But sometimes it's helpful just to look back. That analogy of the car. There's a rearview mirror, and then you have the front windshield, and there's a reason why it's small, the rearview mirror. It's because looking at your past and focusing on it for a long period of time is probably not going to help you too much. You've got to be facing forward, right? But it is helpful to learn from the past. It is helpful to see some of those choices that you could have done differently. And what you said is we have control over our choices. In most cases, we have control over our environment. We have control over how we see things and what we choose to associate with the way that we're seeing things. And, just a simple reframe can sometimes change that perspective to totally shift things. One of the common questions that we all ask ourselves is, why I can't believe I have to do this. Man, I've got to go. I can't stand my job. I got to go to work. I can't stand traffic. I have to sit in traffic for 3 hours, and just changing that from I have to I get to. It's like, I get to sit in this car. Some people are walking or taking the bus. I get to do this for my spouse. Some people don't have one. I get to play with my kids. I get to just a simple reframe like that can begin to shift your perspective to how you're associating your environment, how you're associating things that are happening to you. That's not always easy, and I don't want to minimize that. When you're in that state of suck, when you have a tragedy that happened to you, when you have a loved one that decided to take their own life, or whatever the case may be, there is a season where things just suck, but you can't live there. And so at some point, getting to these little reframes, why is this happening to me, to what is this teaching me? Some of those little reframes that can begin to shift your focus and shift your perspective to change, what these things mean to you.
And I think that's where journaling really comes into play, to where journaling, if you asked me 10 years ago on journaling, it seems kind of like something that middle school girls do, but I equate it as the process of practicing those get to moments, right? To where you're kind of reframing your ability, because it's going to take practice if you're stuck in the I have to's of life.
Yeah.
And you're the victim and life is happening to you. And just start practicing like, I get to walk today. Even if you wrote out like 3 things of like, I get to's in any of these 7 key areas of your life, and just do that. And it's not sexy. No one's going to do a TV show about you for doing it, and no one's going to applaud it on social media, but it'll help. I promise you, because I've been there. And it's those little moments of kind of shaping the discipline there that'll add up, right? So there's one thing that I'm really curious, as you look at men and your clients, what are some stories of, as people proceed through the seasons, and how long does that take? Because it feels like as you go through all 4 steps, I mean, are you an old man at number 4, or can that happen faster? Or, I'm impatient. I like miracle marketing pills and lose weight, lose 50 pounds in 3 days stuff. Like I want that. Right. I want that result, like, tell me there's an easy way to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. The magic pill. I wish I had one. How long does it take? The answer is yes. Because it takes as long as it's going to take. And it also, you're never fully past one of those seasons, right? Our life is a compilation of all those seasons put together in sometimes different order and different time frames and for different lengths of time. And I'll say this, that if in going through a season of suck, there was a miracle magic pill, the victories wouldn't mean as much to you when you come through it. There is meaning and power to being able to say, that sucked in my life and I got through it. And that's a different statement than that sucked in my life and I took a pill and I'm good. Right? As much as I would love that, trust me, I would. But that goes back to the meaning that we apply to things, right? And so to be able to say, I took another step in this season of suck, is part of what builds your confidence to take another step. And so doing those little things, then when another season of suck comes in, when the creditors are calling and you're going up for bankruptcy, right? When your job that you thought was going to happen falls through a week before you relocate your entire family across the country without a plan B, not so smart, right? But I can look back at that. We can look back at that as a family, as a couple, and say, that sucked. There's no minimizing that, but we got through it. And that's a powerful place to be.
Right, because if you talk about the opposite of that, like look at lottery winners, bankrupt NBA players, and people that got their stomachs stapled and then are still struggling with weight loss. Like all people who sought out an instant gratification technique that probably got instant results for a time.
Right.
But what did it do to them? What did it help them accomplish what they truly wanted, or was it just a shortcut? Yeah. And
our lives are a sum of the steps we've taken, the things that have happened to us, the environments that we're in, all of these things, right? And sometimes many times, most times, it takes time to undo bad habits. 21 days to better habits. Yeah, okay. Try 21 years, right? You get to 21 years, that's a habit, right? That's a start. 21 days is a start. It's a fantastic start. 100 days of waking up before the sunrise, fantastic start, right? But sometimes it takes multiple steps to overcome, get through, go over, push through the things that have taken multiple steps to get you where you are. Sometimes there's no way around it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that this can all seem very, very overwhelming. And if you're not in the right state of mind listening to this, it might help make you feel defeated. Like, oh crap, I am inadequate in so many of these areas, and it makes me sad. But one of the key words we've mentioned a few times is assess and measure. And those are things that you do have control over. And those can help get you out of your own damn head and focusing on, okay, this is where it's at. It's like the scale. The nice thing about the scale is it's numbers and you can track it.
Right. Yeah.
The nice thing about finances is it's numbers and you can track it. The other 5, there isn't a whole lot of numbers and there isn't a whole lot of tracking that most people, have a device to do so. So there's an assessment on your website, right, Joel, that if men are in this state, what if they decide to take this assessment, what would they expect? How could this be a tool to help them right now?
Yeah, so I take this assessment myself twice a year. Every 6 months I take this for myself. What's on my website is a miniature version of a bigger assessment that I take people through in coaching or in Oola's digital platform. That's a self-paced platform that people can go through on their own. But so it's a 2-minute version, right? Just kind of become self-aware. And the point is this: when in the expanded version, I take people through 10 questions in each of the 7 F's. And you rate yourself, as they'll do in this assessment, this shorter version. There's just a few questions in each of the 7 F's, and you rate yourself. Now, that takes honesty. It takes self-awareness. It takes being real with yourself, right? All of these things are true. But you do come out with a quantifiable score. If I'm 5 out of 10 in my relationships, well, I get 50% in that relationship, in that area of Oola. If I'm, way in debt and I don't have a plan for my future, I don't have retirement or anything else like that set aside, maybe I have a 2 out of 10 in that area. So it allows you to be honest with yourself without having to think about how am I going to be honest with myself. And you come out of that assessment with a score. The number doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. What matters is the next time you take it, have you improved any? Right? So it gives you a tool, an honest way to look at that and go, huh. And by the way, it's not going to always improve, right? You may be rolling great in all these 7 areas. And we look at it as like a wheel, and each spoke of the wheel is a different F of Oola. And so it's supporting the structure of the wheel. You get everything kind of balanced out, rolling great, you're going to have a smoother ride. Different seasons in your life, you're going to have a spoke that breaks. You're going to have a spoke that you break. You kick your tire because you don't like where things are at. And then it starts to begin a bumpier road, right? And so the point is to be aware and to look at all these 7 areas and just say, where am I weak? Where am I strong? The number is irrelevant, but it's awareness. It's a tool that you can do every 6 months and just say, how am I doing? Because again, going back to the beginning, the fallacy is we don't ask that question. The fallacy is we don't look at these areas. And just like the guy at the circus with all the plates that are spinning on the sticks that are on the table, right? He spins one, cool. Spins another one, okay. Spins the third one, and the first one's starting to wobble. And he goes back and spins that one, and the second one's starting to wobble, and he puts another plate on. The reality is we are, because the human experience defines this. Not me, not Oola, not you, but in our lives, we are made up of these areas, whether we like it or not. And so the fallacy is not focusing, not asking yourself the question, can I do better in this area? Can I strengthen this area? What am I actually passionate about, right? And so that quick assessment, it's super easy. At the end of it, there's a little thing where Oola says, hey, your finances are a little bit weak. Here's a course you could take to do that. We have standalone courses. We have a full year of transformation that is all self-paced. self-guided, but it's all personalized. Everything in Oola is personalized. My one-on-one coaching, the digital platform, all of it. So you go through that assessment and it says, hey, finances could use a little help. Here's some education around how to do that, around the Oola Green Gap thing. Or your fitness is hurting. Have you heard of the 70-20-10 rule? 70% of your effort should be in what you put in your mouth, what you feed yourself with. You can't outwork a bad diet, right? 20% on how you move your body, 10% on rest and recovery. So it builds in some of this philosophy and the education around it. My platform, my learning modules, all that looks different from my wife's. It's completely personalized. So you get some recommendations for that. Take them or leave them. But be self-aware of really where you are. Be honest with yourself, super honest with yourself when you go through it. And there's simple questions, right? But the point is to be looking at what plates are spinning and which ones are not. That's the point.
And I think it's the perfect time of year to start talking about this stuff, because as people are looking at New Year's resolutions and assessing how 2022 went for them and hoping and wanting 2022 to be different, I encourage you to keep score. Because if you didn't keep score, like if you play sports, let's say you're a golfer or basketball or baseball or football, or how much fun would it be if you never kept score? For me, I mean,
everyone would get a trophy. So
right? Yeah. Well, yeah. Let's not go there. The state of that and the frustration associated with that for me as a competitive person. So, I mean, if you're anything like me, and I bet you are, because you're listening to this and you've been a listener for a while, or maybe you're a first-time listener, and if you're at this part of the episode, you must like me. Otherwise, you probably would have turned it off a while ago. Or you like Joel, because he's pretty awesome. So I appreciate you being here and investing in yourself right now. So, but you probably wouldn't have much fun in any of those moments. And that's one thing for me, to where the more I could start like making comparisons towards like, why are sports fun? For me, it's competitive, it's challenging, and there's a measurement, right? So I love the fact that you have a measurement for all these 7 things, because if you just have fitness and finance and you celebrate those and you look down on everybody that doesn't, then you're probably an asshole or a douchebag. And no one wants to be those 2 things, because you probably might have some friends, but they probably really don't like you that much. They're using you for your money or your influence. So anyway, some hard truths or some honesty that
definitely,
if that's you, then let's evaluate and figure this stuff out. So, well, we're coming near the end of our time. So there's a couple questions that I ask all my guests. The first one is, what does it mean to be a man to you, Joel?
That is a powerful question. One of the best allegories, if I can phrase it that way, that I had to learn the hard way in my relationship was the symbolic reference of Jesus Christ as the lion and the lamb. Have the strength of a lion and the heart of a lamb in everything that you do. Don't go in crushing what doesn't need to be crushed. And don't be afraid to bring your strength. But also don't be afraid to connect with your heart in passionate ways. And so bringing that allegory into every area of your life, your friendships, your finances, your spouse, your kids, your relationships, like all of it, bringing that and living in that fulfillment of making sure that you're holding yourself accountable to being the best you. And, sometimes that means asking yourself the tough questions. Sometimes that means really being honest with yourself. Sometimes it means being in a group of friends that are honest enough with you to tell you to shape up, right? Being a man is living in the fulfillment, expanding the fulfillment of every area of your life from the perspective of the strength of a lion and the heart of a lamb.
Man, I love that question. I get a great answer every single time. So, so little pat on the back for myself, but anyway,
That's a good question.
So the second question is we may have already gotten to it, and that's okay. But I ask it every time is I love little wins and I love momentum, and it's really easy to look at a man that sounds like they have everything you don't have, or that sounds like they have it all put together. And the truth is they don't. But if you're in that moment, what are some baby steps that I want you to give homework to the men listening to this, Joel, for the next 7 days? If you're stuck in one of the seasons, what is one thing, one easy win that they can do to get those quick results the next 7 days?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you two answers to this. One is kind of conceptual and one is practical. So, on the practical side, something as simple as when you wake up, drink a full glass of water. We lose, perspiration at night. We lose sometimes about a gallon of water, or perspiration when we sleep. And, especially here in Arizona in the summertime. But just waking up and hydrating is a huge thing. Make that a routine. Get up, drink a glass of water. If you have electrolytes, anything like that can also boost the minerals in your body is a great way to just kind of like wake up, wake your cells up. So from a practical standpoint, there's that. Get outside and take a walk, exercise. If you can, the first thing, maybe you've got newborns or whatever and you can't, but make that a routine. But here's what I would say kind of conceptually, and that is, be honest with yourself enough to ask yourself where to tell yourself, where am I, right? Where do I want to go? And then do this. Write your 3 smallest steps. Not your leap of faith. Write your 3 smallest steps. And what that could look like is, okay, I know I need to get in shape. 2023 is coming. Last year, I told myself this. I didn't do it. Why didn't you do it? Right? Be honest about that. But 3 smallest steps. The first step is look up your gym. Small step. Second step, maybe go drive to the gym. Don't even go inside. Just go drive to the gym. Find out where it is. What's your routine going to look like? How long does it take to get there? What time of day works best for me, right? Third step, maybe just peek your head inside. Go talk to somebody about their membership programs or whatever. But I want you to write your 3 smallest steps, and here's why. 3 steps a day is over 1,000 steps in a year. You may not get 3 steps a day, but if you have 3 baby steps that you can just say, okay, I can just put my shoes out so they're ready to go. Baby step. Win. That's a win. Today, I'm just going to get out of bed. That's a win. Tomorrow, maybe you walk around the block. The next day, maybe you look up your gym, right? So whatever that is, in whatever area of life, be honest with yourself with where you are. Write your 3 smallest steps. And what's going to happen is just the psychology of it, the neuroplasticity of your brain, like all of these things actually come to play for your brain to go, I thought I was a failure, but look, I have evidence that that's not true. So going back to those three questions, is it true? What's my evidence? And is it helpful? And if I can show this past week that maybe every day I didn't do it, maybe some days I just got 2 steps in, maybe some days I got 1 step in, maybe, Wednesday I didn't do anything, right? But you can look back at the week and you can say, but I got 5 in this week. I got 10 in this week. And your brain starts to go, maybe I'm not a failure. Maybe that's not true because I have evidence to the contrary. Little wins make milestones happen.
And a good indicator to look for that is maybe that self-talk that I used to say, I'm not a disciplined person. I used to say that. And it was just a lie. I had a weak disciplined muscle. I was just weak. Like even like, I quit to the gym. I used to have a bulging disc in my back. I have back pain, and I could stay there, or I could go to surgery for it, or I talked to a trainer, and it turns out I just had a weak ass. Like my glutes were weak, my core was weak,
right,
and my hamstrings were weak. So therefore, I had back pain. I fixed those things, or I'm fixing them. I'm getting better at them. I've been doing it for almost 3 years now. And
nice.
Weird. Mostly my back pain is gone most of the time. There are certain things that aggravate it, and usually it's just me doing stuff that I poor form or shouldn't be doing or whatnot, but that's okay. But I went from 5 or 6 pain most days to a 1 or a 2 with the occasional old man grunt if I overdo it.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
All right, man. So if men aren't ready to kind of jump and take the assessment and do coaching and module stuff, I think that men would like to follow you and pay attention to some of your content. And is there a social media channel where people can kind of start building that relationship with you from afar? That passive, like, I'm not ready to meet him yet, but I want to watch him just to see if he's full of shit or not.
Yeah. I wear my mind on my sleeve. You'll figure that out real quick. First, if you just go to my website, wayfindersforlife.com, all my contact information is up there. Most people can't spell my last name to jump on social media. But if you just go to my website, wayfindersforlife.com, we can connect there very easily.
Cool. Well, man, I got a lot of value out of this, and I just want to take a minute to honor you and having the courage and taking those steps in life, because it's with those moments that create a ripple effect, both for ourselves in those moments, but after we do it, our circle sees it, and then friends, family, and then perfect strangers, which we were too until Nick introduced us, to now the perfect strangers sitting on this podcast right now, and the impact and level of influence that we may have just changed. Even if we just changed one life today from this conversation, which I know we have, in a micro moment, I applaud you for that. So thank you for making that level of investment in your life, and for the men listening to this, because we're all better for it. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. That means a lot, man. And I appreciate that you've provided a platform for lives to be changed, because one of the best things any guy can do, anyone that's in that place of suck, is to change what you're listening to. That's one of the best things you can do. That sometimes while you work, while you drive, while you're cooking dinner, like whatever, change that environment of your headspace, of the voices going on in your head by listening to things. And your podcast is that platform to change lives. So I honor you in that.
Thank you, sir. And I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Resisting Beta podcast. Here's where I need your help. I'd love for you to give us a review on your favorite podcast player. Also, follow us on TikTok and Instagram, and share this message out to a man that needs to hear it, because that's how we impact this world. Thank you very much. Make it a great day, men.